Hi, I'm Rebecca Bradley. This is the Virtual Crime Book Club. The date is Monday, the 2nd of November 2020. Today we are discussing The Monogram Murders by Sophie Hannah. Spoilers will be discussed, so if you are watching this after the event, be aware. So if you don't want to listen to spoilers, maybe read the book and then come back and watch the video. Okay. Take it everybody's read the book?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. First question, as always, is did you enjoy it? Who wants to start us off?
I will, if you like. I didn't enjoy. I thought the writing was excellent, in the way that she captured the way that Agatha Christie writes or wrote, and she captured, as far as I was concerned, she captured Poirot's voice. And I thought just the flow of the writing was very good, but I really didn't like it. Did not like it at all. It was so. And again, not her fault, because I think she was just doing her job, which was the Agatha Christie thing. It was so repetitive, and it just went on, and it took about pages and pages just to say such simple things. But that said, I thought it was very well written and achieved what it was meant to achieve, but it just wasn't to my taste.
Mm.
That was my view, anyway.
Yeah. What about anybody else? Do you agree with Sue, or has anybody got a different opinion?
I enjoyed it very much. I thought it was brilliant the way that she adopted Agatha Christie's style, and I thought Poirot as a character came over very well. The story was good. It kept going along at a nice steady pace with plenty of surprises in it. The only thing that I didn't like and I missed was the fact that Edward Catchpole as Poirot's associate was nowhere near I know he's not meant to be the same character, but nowhere like Hastings was to Poirot, and I found that element to be missing. But that apart, I enjoyed it. It was a good novel and entertaining reading.
You know, I did read. Sorry, Margot, go on.
I found I had to read it and put it aside from the Agatha Christie books and look at it as a different book. Because, to be honest with you, I'm pretty much a purist when it comes to Agatha Christie. And I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it anyway. But I thought, but I had to read it forgetting the Christie characters, and I had to read it on its own merits. Although I do agree with you that I missed Hastings very much. I think he added a lot more to the stories, and I was reminded when he wasn't there and someone else was.
I did read an article from Sophie Hannah saying she didn't want any other characters from Agatha Christie's books other than Poirot to be involved. She only wanted to take him as a character and then create a new world for him. So that was the reason that there was nobody else other than him in there.
That really didn't work, because she was using Catchpole as you would have used Hastings as a sounding board.
Well, I think I disagree very slightly, because Catchpole is a policeman.
Yeah.
So he's supposed to be very different from Hastings. But the biggest problem was I missed Hastings dreadfully because we didn't have his warmth. There was no character there that I felt the warmth towards. I mean, Poirot's clever and I like him as a character, obviously, or I wouldn't read them at all. But Hastings brought that sort of very human dimension to bumbling through and being confused and still kind of coming good and being a good chap. And somehow we missed all of that, or I missed it with this policeman who just felt incompetent to me. In a role that he, I expect policemen to be a little bit more. I mean, he didn't even interview the witnesses. It was just so incompetent. But I loved what she did with Poirot. I thought she did that really well.
Yes.
So it's a kind of it's a book of two halves, really, for me. Two characters, and one I like, and one didn't grab me.
Maybe they should have made Catchpole more like Inspector Japp, actually. Don't forget about Hastings, yeah.
Mm.
Well,
You know, if he's a bit more brusque, you know,
Yeah.
and forthright, you know, that old familiarity would come back. Yeah. But I thought, I don't know, I know it's Agatha Christie / Sophie Hannah, but it did get overcomplicated near the end, you know. When he, right at the end, okay, he gathers everybody together, but another murder takes place, and just that part's brushed off, yeah.
And they just continued. This is another murder takes place. There's somebody lying dead in the room, and they're continuing. It was quite bizarre.
Mm. I don't know, arrest. She just sat down and said,
I know, yeah, just continued talking.
Herself, yeah.
Yeah. It was just, I found it a bit bizarre.
I will say, though, that I when I first read it, which was some time ago, I really enjoyed it because I'd missed Agatha Christie so much. But I think I'm right in saying this is probably a bit longer than most of the Christies. So I did find it a bit long-winded, but I still went with it and I liked it. On this reading, I suppose I was being more critical because reading it for the second time and reading it for the book club, there were a lot of things that just didn't work in the plot. And Agatha Christie was always, really quite clever about tying these things together. And it sort of has some holes in it, which was a bit unfortunate for me as well. What
didn't you find worked?
Well, I mean, the overall character of the policeman and some of the things he did, when somebody says to him, please don't interview Dr. Flowerdew, and he says, oh, all right, I won't then. I just thought that it's such a plot device, and it's so transparently, to me, it feels like a plot device. So that, I mean, there were a couple of continuity errors, which I won't go into, but as I say, on the first read, I didn't really feel like that. It was, I read it for a good story, and she sort of carried me with it. But on the second reading, it was much harder to kind of filter out the things that were distracting me from enjoying it quite so much. Has anybody read she's written 3, I think now, or possibly 4. Anybody read any of the others?
Read the first one, but I've forgotten all about it. Yeah. Remember when they got released, she did a question and answer session at Waterstones in London. And she was talking about how she was asked by the Agatha Christie estate to write the book, etc., on a bit of pressure. And it was quite funny because there were some really dedicated Agatha Christie fans. They knew every book and every character. Yeah.
Has anybody read anything of hers that's not Agatha Christie? All right, now because I thought I might try and read something because I thought she was a brilliant writer without a doubt.
Oh yeah.
So I thought I'd try. That's on my list. One of those are on my list. I've not decided yet which one.
Yeah, her other books are completely different because she writes psychological thrillers.
Yeah, which is sort of...
They're funny. They're quite funny as well, actually. But yeah, so totally different writing style. But, well, I think they're really good.
I agree.
Some of the characters were very good. I mean, although they were stereotypic, I like the hotel manager. Was it Lazari, the one that was in charge of the hotel? It came across exactly as one would suspect someone like him would in that age group. And it was very clever writing in that respect. And I wouldn't say you could form empathy with the characters, but you could understand the characters. That's what I felt. They were didn't go too deeply, but you certainly had an understanding of each one of them.
As a retelling, how do you think it compared to the original Agatha Christie Poirot? Anybody?
See, it was very similar because I think everyone's familiar with Hercule Poirot. So, I mean, if you just throw in the odd line about my grey cells and how fussy he is, and occasional piece of Flemish or French, it's
I
identify easily.
I agree that I think she really got Poirot you know, to a T. That for me was the best part of it. It was like he was there, slightly older, but you know, he was there doing his thing, and I really kind of liked that very much. But it did seem, I mean, for me, and I haven't read a lot of Christie recently, although I've revisited quite a few over the years, but they've never seemed, once you've kind of grasped what's going on and it's been revealed, I've always had that kind of, oh yes, whereas at the end of this it was so complex that I just kind of went, oh really, do I have to sit down and think about that as to whether it works or not? And that, I think, was the big thing that is different from Agatha Christie's for me. I didn't get that kind of oh yes moment at any point. Did anyone else?
I'd agree that for me the ending, it was just so complicated, and no, again, I've not read Christie for a long time, but that's not how I remember it. I don't remember having to use my own grey cells at the end to figure it all out.
Yeah, I normally look upon it, and I think that's what it was meant to be, was a sort of a traditional whodunit, wasn't it? And I've not read Christie for years, but I know I always felt traditional whodunit, like a jigsaw, where all the sort of pieces fall into place in the end. But with this, it was almost as if they didn't quite fit. You had all the pieces of the jigsaw, but I don't know, they weren't, you had to hammer them into place or sort of just fiddle about with them a little bit too much. It was, but I also felt there was a lot of repetition in it. Am I the only one that thinks that? Or?
No, I agree with you, and I don't remember that from Agatha Christie's work. No. It was usually quite succinct and clear, whereas there was a lot of repetition, so that you got the same information, you know, twice or three times from different places, which is not comfortable. But then with a plot that complicated, there was a bit of me that sort of went, well, you know, at least it gave you a chance of kind of following it through. But then if you've got to work at it that hard, there's a bit of me thinks this has stopped being a pleasure and started being a
irritating, you know. I found.
Yeah, exactly. And I was never irritated by Agatha Christie. I was enthralled and intrigued and wanted to solve the puzzle. Very rarely did, but got to the end and went, oh yes, I see the picture. It happens. It's magic. I didn't get that from this, but I think I was so disappointed because Sophie Hannah is such a good writer. That I kind of expected more, but it sort of felt so it kind of fell between two things for me, which was a shame. And I haven't read any of the others that she's written. I wondered if she'd got better at it with practice, because it's probably quite strange if you're used to writing psychological thrillers to start doing murder mysteries that have that big puzzle element. But yeah.
Did any of you guess how it was going to end as it was going along? Because it was supposed to be a whodunit. No, nobody.
Well, it was sort of half revealed. To be honest, by the time I got to the end, I was past caring, if I'm brutally honest, because it was sort of half revealed halfway through. You know, about Jenny. Yeah. And I believed it then, because I thought, yeah. And so I didn't really worry too much after that. I just thought, oh, well, just run with it, you know.
Yes, when it got into she was supposed to be the last one standing, and then she'd do something to somebody else, and I was thinking, why would anybody believe she was going to do that anyway? So it just kind of went a little bit crazy at that point. But I thought that, you know, the first Jenny switch of being, you know, the one who was going to be murdered to the one who was sort of in, you know, driving the plot, I thought that worked really well, and that felt quite satisfying. But then it just got overcomplicated with what happened next. So if she'd have stopped it at that point, I think I'd have enjoyed it a lot more. I'd have felt it was a lot more true to Agatha Christie, and I would have probably been very keen to read the next one. So perhaps it's a victim of the psychological thriller twist on twist on twist scenario.
If you could ask Sophie Hannah anything about writing this Agatha Christie book, what would you ask her?
Why?
I think
why can't they just look at Agatha Christie as Agatha Christie,
and move on.
But she was specifically asked to do it.
She was asked.
And
By the
persuaded.
family.
Yeah.
I haven't read Agatha Christie in probably since my teens, which is longer than I care to remember. And I don't really remember the books as such then. But I have to say that just picking this book up and reading it, it doesn't stand up to comparison with so many other crime books on the market today. I've got fed up reading about his little grey cells. I really felt that Poirot was like a caricature of the David Suchet you saw on TV, rather than being a character in his own right. No,
that's a good point.
I think
can I ask? Can I ask you? You said somebody on TV. Is this? Are you talking about an English television show with Hercule Poirot?
Sorry.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
There's been many of them over the years, but the actor David Suchet played him, very well for many years.
Okay.
In the UK, yeah.
Yeah.
And he did the Christie novels. He did the Christie.
He was Poirot in the Christie novels for a long time.
Yeah, but
in the UK,
there must have been a lot of extra series written, not just the novels.
Yeah, they turned it into a series and had other writers coming up with plots. But he's quite a sort of iconic Poirot to the Brits, I think.
I see.
But
you guys have better TV than us. Let me ask, has anybody seen The Reprise by John Malkovich that's on Amazon Prime?
No.
I don't know what the difference is between the United States and Europe, but I would say if you can possibly see it, it's John Malkovich. It's a great performance, but Hercule Poirot is now old and burnt out. He's putting dye, kind of that Death in Venice dye in his hair. And there's actually a moment where he's called out to a murder and the dye runs all over his face and he's humiliated. There's young new cops in Scotland Yard that have never heard of Hercule Poirot except to hate him. And so he's just going through one humiliation after another.
Is that not one of the Christmas specials in the UK?
It's called the ABC Murders.
Yes,
on
it
Amazon.
was, yeah.
I think it was.
But I thought it was pretty. Malkovich, I thought did a pretty good Hercule Poirot.
I can't imagine Poirot like that.
I know. But I read this book as a kind of like going to a Beatles tribute band or something. I wasn't looking for Agatha Christie. I was looking for something, I was looking for a spin and a play on it. And so, but I will have to agree I was really sick of the little gray cells by the end.
A bit overdone.
I think the plot, at the end, where you had the artist, you had this rock solid alibi, yeah? Then he just turned it around and goes, "Oh no, your friends lied for you."
Yeah.
That was like a weak part. It's not really breaking the alibi. It's just saying, "Oh, you have good friends who lied for you."
Yeah, I thought that.
Like all through the book, you kind of thinking she's got the rock solid alibi. If she hasn't, how can we break it? In the case, "Oh, your friend lied."
Going back to your previous question, Rebecca, I went to a lecture where Sophie Hannah was giving at one of our local colleges, and this was just before she published the book. And it wasn't, I didn't ask the question, but somebody else did ask the question about her writing process for this book. And she did say that, if I remember correctly, she said normally when she writes, she plots everything out and she knows what she's going to do and where she's going to write, but she wrote this completely differently in the way that she wrote a first draft and let her see where it took her. She said her words were, because I remember them quite clearly, I wrote a crack book and then gave it to the estate to just get the gist of what she was going to write, and when she approved it, she then wrote a decent book, if you see what I mean. So it was quite interesting just to listen to her writing process, and I could see why she'd have to do that, because obviously she had to get the estate approval. And as I say, I thought, the book, she wrote it well. She could, as far as I was concerned, she got some of the Agatha Christie, but it must have been a terribly difficult thing to do.
I'm not sure I would dare give the estate a crap book.
Well, it was a first draft. It was a first draft that was incomplete, so that they could get the idea of what she was writing. She said, "I wrote a crap book and then a decent book." She said, and to be honest, she said she sort of quite enjoyed it. She said, "I don't know whether she did it again in that way, but that's what she apparently did."
To go back,
they're big shoes to step into, aren't they?
Sorry?
Are.
They're big shoes to step into.
Oh, absolutely.
And Rebecca, as an author, how difficult is it, do you think, to write in the style of someone else, and so as Sophie did in this case? It seems to be an extremely difficult thing to do.
It's hard enough to write as yourself, never mind as somebody else. It's facing the blank page just as in your own style is incredibly difficult, trying to put words on paper, on a screen, as Margot will be able to vouch for. So trying to do it as somebody else will be incredibly difficult. I wouldn't fancy trying to do it. Would you, Margot?
I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Margot, could you do it?
Yeah, no, I don't think that I would. There are only a few authors whose style I could come anywhere near, and even then it would be at best a pale, weak imitation. Because I think as authors we have our own style.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly brave to try and do what authors like Sophie Hannah and the James Bond estate author, who's doing the James Bond book. But who's doing them now? Somebody else is writing them.
Anthony Horowitz.
Yeah,
Horowitz.
Anthony Horowitz.
Oh yes, okay. I don't know.
Yeah, he's writing those now. So it's very brave of them to step into big boots like those.
Brilliant job she did of it. I mean, it was just so good, the way that she had imitated Agatha Christie, with bringing it up to the modern century with the extra plots, because people now, I think, want to have a more complex plot than they would in Agatha Christie in this day and age. We're used to far more complex books than we were at that stage. I mean, the Wilkie Collins and everything else had a much more fixed focus. These days, you read a book and it does have a wide focus, and she's bringing that into the, if you like, 21st century, but through the eyes of Agatha Christie, I thought. Very clever.
I think you've got a good point there, that she's writing an Agatha Christie for a more modern market.
But if you look at things like the #1 Ladies Detective Agency, I mean, they're quite Agatha Christie in their approach. And they are not over complex. They're incredibly popular in the way that Agatha Christie sort of was in her heyday and has continued to be. So I'm not sure I quite agree. Although if I was reading a book that wasn't marketed in that way, then obviously I would probably be looking for something more complicated and twisty in the different sort of subgenres. But yeah, I don't know that I totally agree with that. But that's maybe what she's trying to do. That could be a very good question for her, actually. I think I'd like to ask her what she was doing with, what she intended to do with her young detective character. You know, what was kind of her rationale for creating that particular character? What was it? Did anybody find anything that they thought, oh, that's very Christie-ish about him? Or
no, nothing at all.
Or even anything interesting about him?
I mean, it made you despair for the faith in British police. Is a typical example of what it was. I mean, it was appalling in that respect. As you said, with the lack of interviews and everything else, and not even having a clue as to what was going on. But that's why I really did miss Hastings. Although you had a Hastings character in that would have enhanced the book that much more for me, although I did enjoy it.
And Hastings always had the insight into, you know, the common humanity of people that Poirot didn't always have. Yeah. So it was a very good foil for him, whereas Catchpole didn't seem to have much of a clue about anything.
Poirot says that about Hastings in one of Christie's novels. he says Hastings, he pays Hastings a compliment and says, to him, Hastings is the normal mind personified. I think the word is, I'd have to look it up. But at any rate, he knows exactly who Hastings is to him. Mm. And I didn't see that either in this novel. Like I said, I missed Hastings, but then I kept telling myself, this is not an Agatha Christie novel. This is a Sophie Hannah novel using Agatha Christie's character. So it's bound to be different.
But Poirot, throughout, Poirot was saying to Catchpole, "Oh, well, I'm training you." When he was questioning Poirot about, you know, why didn't you say this, or why didn't you tell me that? You say, well, he was sort of suggesting that he was training him and that he had a lot to learn, which I thought was quite, well, a little bit weird but quite interesting. I didn't get it, to be honest. I didn't get it. But I thought, you know, he did seem to recognize the fact that he was, well, almost in training, I suppose. I don't know. The other thing I thought was quite weird was the narration of Catchpole, because at one point he was narrating and suggesting that Poirot did this, and it was as if he'd got into Poirot's mind, and you think, well, where did that narration come from? How would Catchpole know? It was weird.
Would you have liked to have heard from anybody else's point of view? Rather than just it being narrated by Catchpole?
That would get too complicated because it's quite long as it was. I think if you then had another point of view, it would have got a bit too complex, really.
Yes, I mean, Hastings normally kind of narrates, doesn't he? Because it's his sort of account of things generally that we get. But we don't get it from inside Poirot's head in quite the same way. So I do understand what you mean there. It caused its own problems. I think it was worth a try, probably, but yeah. I think it is a bit, you know, I am aware that I'm being incredibly mean to Sophie Hannah, who's an incredibly good writer and has taken on a pretty much impossible task and done, you know, not a bad job with it to actually make it work, and to my mind do well with Poirot. But maybe it's just that nobody could do it.
Well, I think for what she did it very well. But as I say, it just wasn't. I just felt it wasn't for me. But I think it's got a lot of good reviews, the book, hasn't it? So I think a lot of Agatha Christie fans, it has worked for them.
And she's written 2 or 3 more since. Yeah. So, you know, there is obviously a market for them. But maybe they're from people who didn't read a lot of Agatha Christie. Maybe that's the sort of, you know, that's because they're more aimed at a modern reader, as I think you said earlier on. You know, maybe that is it. Maybe that's where her readership is. People that aren't that familiar with Agatha Christie, for the original novels.
Maybe it's people that have got their understanding from the movie shows and the TV shows, as opposed to
possibly.
Could well be.
Makes sense that way.
Yeah.
Who was your favourite character within the Monogram Murders?
Oh, the coffee shop, the tea shop.
Yeah.
She was brilliant.
I liked her too.
Yeah. Loved her. Anybody else?
Somebody mentioned the hotel guy. I love the hotel, you know, just the heel clicking, you know, I mean, he was like sort of deep into caricature, but I loved him.
He was caricature, I think, but he did have a lot of appeal, I think, in the story.
I thought so, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
The characters made lots of decisions that ultimately affected their lives. Did you agree with all the decisions they were making? Did they frustrate you, annoy you, make you laugh? There was a lot going on. Anything particularly stand out about the characters that you enjoyed or irritated you or anything?
I did enjoy some of the characters, but that was one of the things that I'm still thinking about, is that I didn't feel particularly drawn to them. Nor did I feel particularly strong feelings against them. It's rather hard to put it into words. I didn't have a really strong connection with any of them. I tried to. I mean, I wanted to get into the book, but except for a couple of instances, I didn't feel a connection with them. I'm trying to figure out why. I'm not sure I could say right here, but I really didn't.
Did you read the book, Margot? I listened on audio.
Did I read what?
Did you read it or do it on audio?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you at first. No, I read it.
You read it?
I didn't.
I listened to the audio book.
I felt you could be empathetic to the Nancy Duquesne character, for example, with everything that had happened to her. You felt a lot of sympathy for her. And I think that put the whole of the plot really in context. It was basically it brought out the characters of all the other people that were involved with the murders. I thought she was a particularly interesting character in the book, much more so than the policeman who I just wrote off.
And what about, what were they called? Patrick Ives and his wife. Do you think they were pretty well rounded to say they weren't actually on the page? Because they were quite a big
the vicar,
they were quite a big part of the story, and yet they weren't actually on the page as such. Do you think they were quite well rounded to say they weren't written?
You know, I thought she did a good job trying to flesh out the characters. I actually felt that the scenes where Catchpool is in the village, and I cannot remember the lady's name now, who was always looking at the gravestone and who tells the story. I thought that all of those
Margaret
characters.
Ernst.
Yes, thank you so much. I thought that that element of the story, those parts of the story, she seemed a lot more comfortable writing them than the hotel stuff, than the murderer is in this room stuff. You know, and I particularly liked. I've actually got this. What was her name? Harriet Sipple, right? I thought that you know, she kind of goes out of her way to give you enough backstory on even the worst and most loathsome characters in the book to kind of not exactly feel sympathy for them, but to have a kind of basic understanding of them. And I actually really admired her writing in that. I thought she did a good job with that.
Anybody else?
I suppose I really enjoyed the book. I'm not a reader of Christie, and I suppose you got me to a T there. I'm more of a watcher of the programmes, but I absolutely understood Poirot and what I read. I wasn't looking forward to this month because it was too big, it was too long. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to struggle to read it. But I really enjoyed it, and by halfway through the book I was absolutely engrossed, except towards the end where it was just like, just get on with it, just tell me you did it. You know, it was so I was, oh my God, there's this twist and that twist. I mean, I was in it, but I was with Catchpool where it's like, Poirot, just tell me who's done it, get on with it. But I loved the book, I really enjoyed it, and I probably will go off and read some more of her work.
Brilliant.
Well, I really did enjoy it the first time I read it. I think this time I was just being, because obviously we're going to discuss it, I look at it in perhaps a different way. But when I just read it, when it had just come out, and I thought, actually, she'd done a good job with Poirot, and I enjoyed the story. And yes, it was a bit slow towards the end and a bit repetitive, but actually I sort of forgave that. And thought of it as being a good read. So I'm probably come across as though I hated it this time around, and it's not true.
So
I admire her.
Me too, I liked it.
So would anybody go on to read the next one in the series? Or
I would.
Yeah.
I will. I've actually had the books on my Kindle for quite a while, probably because I probably downloaded them when they were like 99 pence, and I've had them sitting there, so it's pushed me to read it. And I probably will read the other ones that I downloaded as well, because I apart from the ending where I just had to think a little bit too much to follow it, I did enjoy it. It was good, and I liked Margaret. I thought she's quite a feisty woman. I liked that. I liked her spirit. I have to admit, she was my favourite character.
I must admit, I wouldn't read another Agatha Christie of hers, but I would like to read another Sophie Hannah, just to find out what her, just because I think she's a brilliant writer. Clearly.
Yeah.
She does standalones, and she's got a series as well.
Yeah. I was just trying to sort of pick out which one to read.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about this book before we discuss next month? No? Okay, I'll close the meeting and then I'll let you know what we're doing next month. So thank you everybody for coming.
Rebecca.
And we will see you at the next meeting.
Yeah.